attack. And the announcement that the perpetrators were in the sights of Scotland Yard, whatever that meant, that did not go over particularly well across the proverbial pond. Asked directly about President Trump's tweet, British Prime Minister Theresa May said this.
I never think it's helpful for anybody to speculate on what is an ongoing investigation.
May's former chief of staff, Nick Timothy, was even more blunt, tweeting, quote, "True or not, and I'm sure he doesn't know, this is so unhelpful from leader of our ally and intelligence partner." This presidential propensity for jumping into the fray when wounds are still fresh and facts are still being ascertained, it does seem to have some limits, even after the world had seen images of vile racists, neo-Nazis, and the Klan marching in Charlottesville, Virginia, people carrying torches, shouting, "Jews will not replace us," and racist slogans in the streets. Well, President Trump, that was a time we saw restraint from him.
I like to be correct. I want the facts. I couldn't have made it sooner because I didn't know all of the facts. Frankly, people still don't know all of the facts.
The president's response to Charlottesville, as recently as yesterday, he was suggesting an equivalence between the neo-Nazis and those protesting the neo-Nazis. This continues to upset wide swaths of the American public, including Republican Senator Tim Scott from South Carolina, who yesterday issued a statement that read in part, quote, "Antifa is bad and should be condemned, yes, but the KKK has been killing and tormenting black Americans for centuries. There is no realistic comparison, period," unquote. Others, especially many in the African-American community, have responded to the president's widely criticized take on the issue of white supremacists with a harsher tone. On Monday night, ESPN host Jemele Hill went on something of a Twitter rant against the president, one of her tweets reading, quote, "Donald Trump is a white supremacist who has largely surrounded himself with other white supremacists." On Wednesday, from the White House podium, Press Secretary Sarah Sanders called Hill's tweets a fireable offense. This is the first time that we know of in history that a White House called for the employee of a private company to be fired because he or she criticized the president. One can only imagine the response had then President Obama suggested that NBC fire a certain reality television star for pushing the lie that the first African-American president had been born in Africa, but I digress. This morning, President Trump weighed in on this ESPN controversy, tweeting, "ESPN is paying a really big price for its politics and bad programming. People are dumping it in record numbers. Apologize for untruth." ESPN can speak for itself on programming and ratings, but Mr. Trump's demand for an apology from ESPN and or Jemele Hill is interesting when you consider how often the president has lashed out and attacked others and then did not apologize. It's also interesting to hear him express offense for something he calls an untruth, given how many untruths he has not only shared but concocted. But let us, for now, specifically address how offended the president is that an ESPN anchor called him a white supremacist, because that is a harsh assessment. It is an ugly charge. Here's some context of which you may not be aware. In 2012, the Daily Caller got their hands on a 2007 Obama speech in which the then senator, speaking before a largely African-American audience, suggested that the U.S. government deals with some crises, New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina, for example, differently because the victims are largely black. Here was President Trump's response on Twitter, quote, "Obama's 2007 speech, which Daily Caller just released, not only shows that Obama is a racist, but also how the press always covers for him. In fact, a cursory review of the @DonaldTrump Twitter archive shows that President Trump has called racist not only President Obama, he has made that ugly charge against black journalists Bryant Gumbel, Tavis Smiley, and Touré. He's also suggested that Jon Stewart is a bigot and Senator Elizabeth Warren is a racist, as is the Quentin Tarantino movie Django Unchained and the title of the TV show Blackish." So this is where the conversation all begins. In Donald Trump's view, these people are racists, and post-Charlottesville, even though officials in his own White House were dismayed by his remarks, the president feels he is the one who is owed an apology. The White House doubled down today on their statement that ESPN's Jemele Hill's tweet calling the president a white supremacist is a fireable offense. I'm joined now by former NFL player Dante Stallworth. First of all, what's your take on the White House demanding an apology from either Jamel Smith or ESPN?
I think it's interesting that the president has used the power of the Oval. He's used the power of the executive branch to not only intimidate and to bully his political adversaries, but he's also done this to our nation's allies. He's also done this to his own staff, as we've seen today with him calling Jeff Sessions an idiot. The president should not be calling for anyone's job because they're criticizing him. That is a key characteristic of what an authoritarianism is. And the president of the United States of an open and free society should not be discussing those things.
So I guess their idea, where they're coming from is that is such a horrific thing for her to say about him, that he's a white supremacist, that it just goes beyond the pale and is fireable. It is a really ugly charge. It obviously does have some context. I don't know what's in President Trump's brain. I would never call him a white supremacist. What do you think of the charge itself?
Well, I know one thing is that he has surrounded himself with white supremacists. I don't think that can be denied. And another thing that he's done is he has openly not defended people who have been victims of the neo-Nazis or KKKs on the streets in Charlottesville. It took him a while to come out and condemn those factions. And so when you enable those people and when you don't condemn them immediately right away, they feel like they have some opening, since the previous 8 years that a black man has been the president of the United States. For the most part, you could probably say that didn't sit too well with these folks, these particular folks. And so then you hear them marching down the street, marching about Jews will not replace us. I mean, these are ridiculous and dangerous things, and he has not condemned those. So the fact that he has not condemned those at the very least tells you that he's emboldened these people.
Well, he did go on. I mean, you remember there was a statement on a Saturday and then a statement on a Monday and a statement on a Tuesday. At one point, he did go out and say neo-Nazis and the Klan.
At one point, but it wasn't at the top of his mind. It wasn't something that was at the forefront of his mind to come through and condemn those actions right away. And to me, that says a lot about what he's doing.
Let me ask you about politics and sports, because obviously anybody who is even a minor sports fan knows that it's happened, but it usually is fairly rare. You can think about the Olympic Black Power display. You can think about Muhammad Ali. But there is just a rash of politics going on right now. A lot of athletes, not just Colin Kaepernick, but plenty of individuals making their political voices heard. Some people love it, obviously. Other people might think, Monday Night Football is when I can get away from all that and I just want to talk about the game.
Right.
What do you think?
Well, I'm reminded by what the great Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, and he said that your moral compass should not be silent, and no matter what it is. And so he spoke on that, and not only, I think the main motivating factor for him to actually say those words was Muhammad Ali. He spoke glowingly about Muhammad Ali standing up to the United States government about not going to the war in Vietnam and not fighting a war when there was essentially a war going on here, where he said he could not go to a restaurant and sit next to his white brothers and sisters and have dinner with them. So why would he go all the way to Vietnam? Martin Luther King said that, and in the start, the catalyst from him saying that was Muhammad Ali's actions. And so people will always have negative thoughts and issues, what they want to say about athletes when they're speaking out, especially when they don't agree with it, right? It's when you don't agree with something, I think that's the point when you really need to check your hypocrisy and understand that it works both ways. Free speech works both ways, whether you agree with it or not.
All right, Dante Stallworth, always good to see you. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.